Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We're going to be taking a deep dive today into the world of Toronto GTA power of sale listings.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating corner of the market,
Yeah.
especially for those looking to maybe snag a deal and um, kind of, become a real estate hunter in this market.
Yeah, you can find some real hidden gems there.
Exactly. So to help us kind of navigate all of this, we've got a few sources lined up. But what I wanted to focus on right away is a realtor in the Toronto area, Manoj Atri.
Okay.
He's got a webpage, and we'll link it in the show notes, but you can find it at manojatri.com/silver listings. And right away, I was drawn to this because he's offering free access to, these hot new power sale listings.
That's a great resource for anyone just starting out trying to get a feel for the market.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, he specializes in power of sale listings and specifically in the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area. So,
She really knows his stuff then.
yeah, that's kind of the vibe I get from it. It seems like he's got a lot of experience and he's got access to all those TRB, MLS power sale, and bank sale listings, which I think is great.
It can be really overwhelming trying to sift through all those listings on your own, especially if you're not familiar with the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to have someone like that, kind of curating those listings and providing that insight is incredibly valuable.
Mm.
And I thought this was really cool too. You can actually sign up on his page to get those distress sale and fixer upper listings sent right to your inbox.
Wow, so you don't even have to go hunting for them.
Exactly. You just kind of sit back, relax, and let those deals come to you.
That's fantastic, especially for busy people who don't have a lot of time to spend searching.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's actually a good segue into one thing that he mentions right on his page is that these power of sale properties are typically sold as is.
Ah, so buyer beware.
Yeah, exactly. So
Mhm.
this is where due diligence becomes like super important.
You really need to know what you're getting into.
Definitely buyers need to be prepared for the possibility of, hidden repairs, competing bids, all those things that can kind of throw a wrench in the process.
It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Exactly. It's a bit more of a fast-paced game,
Hmm.
and you need to be a little more strategic, I would say.
Well, that makes sense given the nature of these sales. Lenders are often looking to recoup their losses as quickly as possible.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
correct.
So there's a sense of urgency. And that actually brings me to another interesting point about Manoj's website. To get more detailed information about those listings, you have to sign a buyer representation agreement.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a commitment before you get access to all the juicy details.
Exactly. And at first I thought that was, maybe an extra hoop to jump through. But then when I thought about it, it actually makes sense.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, it protects both the buyer and the realtor. It ensures clear communication, sets those expectations and prevents any misunderstandings down the line.
That's a good point. It's all about transparency and building that trust.
Exactly. And especially in a market as hot as Toronto, I think that transparency is crucial. Okay, so we've kind of talked about the how of finding these listings through Manoj's website,
Hmm.
but I think now we need to step back and look at the why. Why are power of sale listings becoming more common?
Well, I think a big part of it is the Canadian housing market. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride the last few years.
It really has. We saw those sky-high prices and then a sudden slowdown.
Yeah.
And now everyone's kind of holding their breath to see what happens next.
Exactly. And you can't ignore the Bank of Canada's recent interest rate cuts. They're down to 3.75% now, lowest they've been since December 2022.
That's a big change. And it's supposed to stimulate the economy, but a lot of people are worried that it's going to lead to another housing boom.
That's the big question, isn't it? Will those lower rates entice more buyers to jump back into the market? Or will affordability concerns keep a lid on things? It's a tough one to call.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a gamble, isn't it? And what's even crazier is that the Bank of Canada is actually kind of counting on a housing frenzy for their GDP forecast. They're basically looking for a repeat of that 2021 investor-driven boom.
Wow, so they're really banking on the housing market to pull us out of this.
It seems that way, but, it's not that simple. There are a lot of factors at play here.
Absolutely. Affordability is a huge concern. And then there's the stress test for mortgage qualification. People can only borrow so much, even with those lower interest rates.
Right? It's like a safety net to prevent people from getting in over their heads.
But even with that safety net in place, there's still a lot of uncertainty. And I think that's where resources like Manoj's website become even more valuable. Having that expert insight and that curated list of properties can really help buyers navigate this tricky market.
It's like having a guide in the wilderness.
Mhm.
Someone who knows the terrain and can help you avoid those pitfalls.
Exactly. And speaking of pitfalls, let's talk about why we're seeing this increase in power of sale listings in the first place.
Well, it all boils down to financial strain, right?
Right. The recent housing market slowdown has put a lot of homeowners in a tough spot.
They're facing higher mortgage payments, rents aren't rising as quickly as they were, and suddenly some people are finding themselves struggling to keep up.
And it's not just homeowners. We're seeing investors feeling the pinch too. Remember a while back when everyone was rushing to buy up rental properties?
Yeah, it seemed like every other person was becoming a landlord.
Well, now those same investors are facing mounting losses. Rents have plateaued in many areas. Mortgage payments are up. And some of them are being forced to sell those properties just to break even.
Ouch. Yeah, that's gotta hurt.
And as more investors sell, it can create a domino effect. Prices start to decline, and more homeowners might find themselves owing more on their mortgage than their property is worth.
That's scary. And then on top of all that, you've got all these new condo units hitting the market in Toronto.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
A lot of them are owned by investors, and it's just adding to that oversupply.
So it's putting even more downward pressure on rents?
Exactly. And it's creating a perfect storm for those power of sale listings.
Because as more people struggle to make their payments, more properties are going to end up in the hands of the lenders.
Right. And that's where the opportunity lies for those savvy buyers. They can potentially snag a property at a discounted price. But again, it comes back to due diligence. You have to do your homework and make sure you're not getting into something that's going to be a money pit.
A good inspector is worth their weight in gold in these
No,
situations.
absolutely. They can help you uncover any hidden problems and make sure you're making a sound investment.
So while it might seem a bit daunting at first, power of sale listings can be a fantastic opportunity for the right buyer.
Exactly. It's like anything in real estate. You have to weigh the risks and the rewards.
And knowledge is your best defense against those risks.
Couldn't agree more. So for those of you out there looking to dip your toes into the Toronto GTA power of sale market, remember, do your research, be prepared to move quickly, and don't be afraid to seek expert advice.
Yeah, that's great advice. And if you're looking for a place to start, Manoj Itri's website is a fantastic resource. We'll make sure to include that link in the show notes.
And we'll be back after a quick break to dig a little deeper into the impact of those Bank of Canada rate cuts and what it all means for the future of the Toronto GTA housing market. Stay tuned.
Can't wait. You know, before we move on from power of sale listings, I was thinking about something you mentioned earlier, the affordability crisis.
Oh,
Do you think these power of sale properties could be a good option for people who are struggling to, enter the market?
that's an interesting point because, yeah, they do tend to come at a lower price point.
Exactly.
So, I mean, potentially they could be a more accessible route to homeownership.
Especially with those rising interest rates and everything.
Right. It's definitely something to consider. But I think it's important to remember that, those lower prices often come with certain caveats.
Oh, for sure. It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
It's exactly. I mean, we talked about the as-is condition, but what are some other challenges buyers might run into?
Well, one of the biggest ones is speed. You have to be ready to move quickly with these power of sale listings.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
Lenders are usually pretty eager to get those properties off their books.
They want to recoup their losses.
Right, exactly. See, that means, buyers might have to make a decision fast. Maybe waive some conditions in their offer.
So it's not for the indecisive buyer.
Not at all. You got to be ready to pull the trigger.
Makes sense. Which is another reason why having someone like Manoj on your side can be so helpful.
Absolutely. He can help you navigate that whole process.
And make sure you're not missing any crucial details.
Exactly, because the last thing you want is to rush into a deal and then realize you've made a big mistake.
Right. Like that story we talked about earlier, the family that lost their deposits,
Oh, yeah, that was a tough one.
dealing with someone who wasn't even a licensed agent.
Talk about a nightmare scenario.
It just goes to show how important it is to, do your homework.
Verify credentials, check for complaints, all that due diligence stuff.
Exactly. Because whether it's power of sale or a traditional listing, you don't want to jump into anything blindly.
Well said. So yeah, power of sale listings, definitely some potential there, but gotta be cautious.
Risks and rewards, like anything in real estate.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked a lot about these specific listings,
Yeah.
but I think it's time to zoom out a bit.
Look at the bigger picture.
Right. What about those Bank of Canada rate cuts we were discussing? How do you think they're going to impact the housing market as a whole?
Well, it's tough to say for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, cheaper borrowing costs should make it easier for people to get into the market,
Right. More buyers,
potentially driving up demand.
which could lead to higher prices.
Exactly. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Some experts are predicting a surge in activity,
Yeah, I've heard that too.
but then others are more cautious. They're pointing to the affordability issue.
Right. Even with lower rates,
Yeah.
housing is still expensive.
And then there's the stress test. that's still in place.
Yeah.
So it's not like everyone can suddenly qualify for a massive mortgage.
Just like a safeguard to prevent people from overextending themselves.
Exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It's like a giant experiment,
Hmm.
and we're all part of it.
Well said. And that's why I think it's so important for people to stay informed.
Absolutely. Educate yourself, do your research.
And don't be afraid to reach out to the experts. Like Manoj, he's got a wealth of knowledge about the Toronto market.
Exactly. He can help you make sense of all the chaos.
All right, so let's bring it back to those investors. They're playing a pretty big role in all of this, aren't they?
Oh, definitely.
Hmm.
We've talked about how some of them are selling off properties.
Sometimes even at a loss.
Yeah. Which could be a good opportunity for buyers.
Potentially. But you got to be careful. Not all investors are the same.
That's a good point.
Some are in it for the long haul. Others are just looking to make a quick buck. Exactly. So when you're looking at power of sale listings, it's important to try and figure out who the previous owner was.
And what their motivation was for selling.
Right, because
Yeah.
you don't want to end up with a property that's been, hastily flipped and might have hidden problems.
Another reason why due diligence is so crucial.
Absolutely. Always, always, always do your homework.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Power of sale listings, interest rate cuts, investors.
Yeah.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It is. It's all part of this complex ecosystem that is the Toronto GTA housing market.
It's like a giant puzzle.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to figure out where the pieces fit.
Well put. And while we can't predict the future with 100% certainty,
Right.
we can at least arm ourselves with the knowledge and the resources to make informed decisions.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do here on the deep dive.
Give you the tools you need to navigate this wild world of real estate.
All right, so before we wrap things up, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the luxury market.
Ooh, the high rollers.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because what happens at the top end of the market often trickles down to the rest of us.
Interesting. What have you noticed there?
Well, it's interesting, because we've seen reports of like luxury condo sales declining in cities like Toronto and Vancouver,
Really?
which suggests that even the wealthy are maybe feeling a little bit more cautious.
Makes sense. I mean, everyone's kind of feeling the pinch these days.
Yeah, exactly. But here's where it gets kind of interesting. While condo sales are softening, the demand for single-family homes in that luxury bracket is still really strong.
Oh, wow. So it's like two different markets almost.
It really is. And I think it speaks to that, that desire for space and exclusivity.
Yeah, those prime neighborhoods with the detached homes, they always seem to hold their value.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's just not that much inventory. So that scarcity drives up the prices.
Classic supply and demand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, for those of us who aren't, shopping for a multi-million-dollar mansion, what does all this tell us about the overall market?
Well, I think it shows that, even in a changing market, there are still pockets of strength.
Right. Certain segments that are maybe less affected by those broader trends.
Exactly. And I think it also highlights the importance of really understanding the nuances of each market segment.
You can't just look at the overall numbers. You have to dig deeper.
Exactly, because what's happening in the luxury market might not necessarily be happening in the more affordable segments.
Right. And that's where those power of sale listings come in.
They offer a different kind of opportunity.
A more accessible entry point for some buyers.
And as we've been saying, having someone like Manoj on your side can be invaluable in those situations.
Absolutely. He can help you navigate that whole process and make sure you're getting a good deal.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest one is to stay informed.
Always a good idea.
Right. Keep an eye on market trends, interest rates, all those factors that can impact your decisions.
Don't just rely on headlines. Do your own research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask for expert advice.
A good realtor can save you a lot of time and money.
Oh, absolutely. They can help you avoid costly mistakes, negotiate effectively, and ultimately find the right property for your needs.
Think of them as your real estate wingman.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And finally, I think it's important to remember that the market is constantly changing.
It never stands still.
Exactly. So you got to be flexible, be adaptable, and be ready to adjust your strategy as needed.
Well said. It's a dynamic landscape out there.
It really is. So what's the future of the Toronto GTA housing market? Is it a buyer's market or a seller's market?
You know what? I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah, I agree. There are opportunities out there for everyone, but you have to know where to look.
And you have to be smart about it.
Absolutely. So do your research, talk to the experts, and most importantly, don't be afraid to jump in.
It's an exciting time to be in real estate, that's for sure.
It is. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Toronto GTA housing market.
It's been a pleasure.
And be sure to check out Manoj Atri's website for those hot new power of sale listings. We'll link it in the show notes. Until next time, happy house hunting.